A river moves quietly through southeastern Massachusetts. It has flowed for thousands of years, long before highways, long before cities, long before European ships crossed the Atlantic, and sitting along its edge is a massive stone. 40 tons of silent granite, weathered, darkened, ancient. At first glance, it seems ordinary. But as the tide lowers and the light shifts, something appears on its surface. Lines, figures, strange carvings etched into the rock. Not random cracks, not natural fractures, marks made by human hands. For more than 3 centuries, scholars, explorers, historians, and conspiracy theorists have argued over this stone. Who carved it? When? And what does it say? This is the story of Dighton Rock, a single boulder that may hold one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries. Long before European settlers arrived, the region around the Taunton River was home to indigenous peoples. The Wampanoag and other Algonquian-speaking tribes lived throughout present-day New England. They fished these waters. They navigated the river by canoe. They carved stories into natural landscapes. Rock art, known as petroglyphs, was not unusual in North America. Across the continent, indigenous cultures pecked symbols into stone. Animals, human figures, spiritual imagery. But when European settlers arrived in the 1600s, they often misunderstood what they saw. Different culture, different worldview, different assumptions. The colonists encountered Dighton Rock and saw mystery. But the land had memory long before they arrived. The earliest documented description of the carvings dates to 1680. A colonial judge named John Danforth sketched the rock's surface in his diary. His drawing is crude. Lines appear scattered and uneven. Some shapes resemble stick figures. Others appear geometric. But already, interpretation begins. Danforth described the markings as strange characters. He did not know what they meant, but importantly, he recorded them. And here is where the mystery begins to multiply. Because every person who later sketched the rock produced a slightly different version. Why? Because the rock's surface is uneven. Because erosion alters visibility. Because perspective changes interpretation. From the beginning, the evidence was unstable. Dighton Rock weighs approximately 40 tons. It measures about 5 feet high and 11 feet long. Its carved surface slopes toward the river. For centuries, it was partially submerged by tidal water. Twice daily, the Taunton River washed over its face. Imagine what that does to carved lines. Water erodes detail. Freezing winters crack surfaces. Algae obscure markings. The rock we see today is not identical to the rock seen in 1680. Some carvings may have faded. Others may appear deeper due to weathering. Which raises a critical question. Are we interpreting the original carving or a distorted version shaped by time? Mystery compounds. By the 18th and 19th centuries, speculation flourished. Europeans living in the New World were obsessed with origins. Who discovered America first? Could it have been Phoenicians? Vikings? Lost tribes of Israel? When scholars examined Dighton Rock, some believed they saw Old World writing systems. They attempted translations. Some claimed it was a record of ancient voyages. Others insisted it was evidence of pre-Columbian European contact. But here is the pattern. Each interpretation reflected the interpreter's cultural background. A Danish scholar saw runes. A Portuguese historian saw Iberian script. A religious theorist saw biblical symbolism. The same lines, different meanings. The rock became a mirror. There is a psychological dimension to this mystery. Humans are wired to detect patterns. This ability helped our ancestors survive. Recognizing shapes in darkness meant identifying predators. But it also means we sometimes see meaning where none exists. Ambiguous markings are fertile ground for projection. Dighton Rock is ambiguous. Its carvings are shallow, irregular, lacking clear linguistic structure. And when meaning is unclear, imagination fills the void. Over centuries, the rock accumulated theories, each layer adding complexity, but not clarity. In 1963, authorities made a decision. Dighton Rock would no longer sit exposed to river erosion. It was moved into a protective museum structure in Massachusetts. Today, visitors can see it indoors. Preserved, stabilized, still enigmatic. But moving it changed something subtle. The rock is no longer part of the flowing landscape. It is now an artifact. And artifacts invite interpretation. So what is Dighton Rock? An indigenous petroglyph? Evidence of lost explorers? A colonial misunderstanding? Or something in between? Perhaps the more important question is this: why are we so determined to assign it a dramatic origin? Why do we search for distant civilizations when local explanations may exist? Sometimes mystery survives not because answers are impossible, but because the story is more compelling than the solution. Imagine this: it is not 1492, it is not Columbus, it is not Spanish sails on the horizon. Instead, it is the year 1000, a longship cuts through cold Atlantic waves. Its carved wooden prow rises and falls against the sea. On board are Norse explorers, hardened sailors from Greenland and Iceland. They are not searching for spices, they are searching for land. And some historians believe they may have reached North America nearly 500 years before Columbus. But what if they traveled even farther south? What if they reached New England? And what if they left behind proof carved into stone? Tonight, we examine one of the most persistent theories surrounding Dighton Rock. Was it carved by Vikings? Before we look at Dighton Rock itself, we must ask, did Vikings reach North America at all? The answer is yes. In 1960, archaeologists confirmed Norse presence at Meadows. The site contained unmistakable evidence: Norse-style buildings, iron smelting remains, artifacts linked directly to Greenlandic settlers. Radiocarbon dating placed the site around the year 1000 CE. This discovery transformed history books. Columbus was no longer the first European to reach the Americas. But Newfoundland is far north. Dighton Rock is in Massachusetts. That's roughly 1,000 miles farther south. So the question becomes, could Norse explorers have traveled that far? In the 19th century, scholars began proposing bold ideas. One of the most famous proponents was Danish scholar Carl Christian Raffin. He believed Norse explorers had traveled extensively along North America's coast. When observers examined Dighton Rock, some thought they saw runic characters, angular shapes, straight lines, markings resembling letters from the younger Futhark alphabet. Some interpretations claimed the rock recorded an expedition led by a Norse explorer. Others believed it commemorated a voyage or settlement. Supporters pointed to similarities between certain carvings and known runes. But there was a problem. Runes are systematic. They form linguistic structures. Dighton Rock's markings appear scattered and inconsistent. Still, once the idea took hold, it spread quickly. Because the Viking narrative was compelling. Heroic explorers. Pre-Columbian discovery. A bold rewriting of history. It captured the imagination. Here's where the mystery becomes psychological. Human brains are exceptional at pattern recognition. We see faces in clouds, animals in constellations, meaning in randomness. This phenomenon is called pareidolia. When scholars looked at Dighton Rock, they were not seeing a blank surface. They were seeing potential confirmation of a hypothesis. If you believe Vikings traveled south, you may begin to see runes. If you believe Phoenicians crossed the Atlantic, you may see Semitic characters. If you believe indigenous tribes created symbolic art, you see cultural motifs. The same grooves, different conclusions. And here lies the tension. The Norse theory depends heavily on interpretive alignment rather than clear linguistic structure. Unlike inscriptions in Scandinavia, which follow grammatical rules, Dighton Rock lacks consistent spacing, repetition, or syntax. There is no definitive Norse sentence. Only shapes that resemble letters if you look at them a certain way. Could Vikings have physically reached Massachusetts? It is not impossible. Norse longships were remarkably capable. They navigated open oceans. They reached Greenland. They survived harsh Atlantic conditions. Saga literature, particularly the Vinland sagas, describes land south of Greenland rich in grapes and forests. Some historians speculate Vinland may have extended beyond Newfoundland, but saga literature is semi-legendary, blending history and storytelling. No confirmed Norse archaeological sites have been found in New England. No Norse artifacts. No settlements, no tools. Only Dighton Rock, interpreted through 19th century enthusiasm. That absence of supporting evidence weakens the theory significantly. The Viking theory gained popularity during a time of growing Scandinavian immigration to the United States. Claiming Norse discovery of America became culturally powerful. It offered an alternative origin story, one not centered on Spain, one that aligned with Protestant Northern Europe. Historical interpretation is rarely neutral. It reflects the cultural climate of its time. Dighton Rock became more than a stone. It became symbolic. Proof if one could find it, of deeper European roots in America. But symbolism is not evidence. Today, most archaeologists reject the Viking interpretation. Not because Viking travel is impossible, but because the evidence on Dighton Rock does not meet linguistic standards for confirmed runic writing. Additionally, indigenous petroglyph traditions provide a more consistent explanation: shallow pecked carvings, symbolic imagery, non-linear design. These characteristics align more closely with Algonquian artistic traditions. But the Viking theory refuses to disappear entirely because mystery fuels persistence. And because the idea of ancient explorers carving messages in stone remains captivating. So, what is Dighton Rock? A Norse message? A misunderstood indigenous artwork? A canvas for projection? Perhaps it tells us less about Vikings and more about ourselves, our desire to rewrite history, our need for dramatic origins, our attraction to hidden discoveries. In the next episode, we dive into even more controversial territory: Phoenicians, Portuguese explorers, and theories that stretch far beyond established history. The mystery deepens. Vikings, Templars, or something older? The transatlantic mystery of Dighton Rock. Imagine standing on the edge of a quiet river in Massachusetts. The tide is low. Before you lies a massive boulder, silent, weathered, ancient. But carved into its surface are strange symbols. Some look like ships. Some resemble human figures. Some appear to be letters, but in what language? For centuries, scholars, explorers, and dreamers have argued over one question: who carved Dighton Rock? And why? Was it the work of Native Americans? Did Vikings reach New England long before Columbus? Did secretive medieval knights leave a coded message in stone? Tonight, we dive into one of America's most enduring historical mysteries, the carvings of Dighton Rock. And as the theories grow bolder, so does the mystery. Part 1. A rock that shouldn't be there. Dighton Rock sits along the Taunton River in what is now Berkeley, Massachusetts. The boulder itself is massive, roughly 40 tons of gray sandstone. Its smooth face tilts slightly upward, as if deliberately positioned to be read. For centuries, it was partially submerged by the tide. Only at low water could the carvings be seen clearly. The first recorded European mention of the rock dates back to 1680, when Reverend John Danforth sketched its strange symbols. But here's the problem. Even in the 1600s, no one knew who made them. And the carvings were already weathered. That means the inscriptions were likely much older. But how much older? Part 2. The Native American Theory. The most widely accepted explanation today is that the carvings were created by Native Americans, likely ancestors of the Wampanoag people. The region was home to indigenous communities long before European arrival. Petroglyphs, rock carvings, are not uncommon in North America. Many scholars believe Dighton Rock's symbols match Algonquian-style motifs: human figures, animals, spiritual imagery. Some shapes resemble ceremonial or storytelling imagery rather than writing. But there's a complication. Some carvings appear geometric and linear, almost alphabetic. And that opened the door to far more dramatic theories. Part 3. The Viking Theory. In the 1800s, Danish scholar Carl Christian Raffin examined drawings of Dighton Rock. He believed the carvings were Norse runes. According to Raffin, the rock proved that Vikings reached New England centuries before Columbus. Now, we know that Vikings did reach North America around 1000 CE. The site of Meadows confirms this, so the idea wasn't completely impossible. Raffin even claimed to identify a date and the name of the explorer Thorfinn Karl Sifni in the carvings. But modern runologists disagree. The supposed runes do not clearly match known Norse inscriptions. Many believe Raffin was interpreting random shapes as letters, a classic case of seeing patterns where we want to see them. Still, the Viking theory refuses to die. Because if Vikings reached Newfoundland, could some have sailed farther south? The mystery deepens. Part 4. The Portuguese connection. In the early 20th century, another theory gained popularity. Some researchers claimed the carvings included the name of Portuguese explorer Miguel Corte-Real. Corte-Real vanished in the early 1500s while searching for his missing brother in the North Atlantic. Supporters of this theory believed he reached New England and left his mark. Some even claimed to see a Portuguese coat of arms etched into the stone. But again, experts remain skeptical. The carvings are so weathered and overlapping that interpretations vary wildly. Are we seeing deliberate inscriptions or centuries of erosion layered with imagination? Part 5. The Templar Theory. Then there's perhaps the most sensational theory of all, the Knights Templar. The medieval order known as the Knights Templar was dissolved in the early 1300s. Legend says some members escaped persecution. Some believe they sailed west carrying treasure, secrets, perhaps even sacred relics. And according to fringe theories, the Dighton Rock contains Templar symbols, crosses, shields, mysterious geometric patterns. But historians caution, there is no solid archaeological evidence placing Templars in North America. Still, the idea captures the imagination. A secret order crossing the Atlantic centuries before Columbus? It sounds like legend. But sometimes legends begin somewhere real. Part 6. The problem with the rock. Here's the real issue. The carvings overlap. Some lines are deep, others shallow. Some may have been added later. Over centuries, erosion blurred edges and distorted shapes. In 1963, the rock was moved into a protective museum structure to preserve it. Today, visitors can view it at Dighton Rock State Park, but even with modern scanning technology, the carvings remain ambiguous. No clear alphabet, no definitive language, no single narrative. Which leaves us with an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. Part 7, a message we can't read. Maybe Dighton Rock was never meant to be read like a book. Perhaps it was ceremonial. Perhaps it marked territory. Perhaps it recorded an event now forgotten. Or maybe multiple cultures interacted with the rock across centuries, each adding their own mark. If that's true, Dighton Rock isn't a message from one civilization. It's a layered archive of human presence. A palimpsest carved in stone, and that makes it even more fascinating. Because instead of proving a dramatic lost voyage, it reveals something quieter, but equally profound. Human beings have always felt the urge to leave a mark. To say, we were here, closing reflection. Dighton Rock doesn't give us certainty. It gives us questions, it challenges our desire for clear answers. And maybe that's why it still captivates us centuries later. Because in those fading lines, we see ourselves searching for meaning, searching for origins, searching for proof, and sometimes the mystery is the message. What if the story of America's discovery is incomplete? What if long before Columbus, before the Pilgrims, before even the Vikings, someone else crossed the Atlantic? And what if the only proof they left behind was a cryptic message carved into stone? Tonight, we return to Dighton Rock, but this time we follow a different trail. Not just carvings, but maps. Secret maps. Because in the age of exploration, knowledge was power. And power was never shared freely. During the 1400s and 1500s, European kingdoms competed fiercely for control of sea routes. Spain, Portugal, England. Cartography became a state secret. Maps were locked away, protected, sometimes even falsified to mislead rivals. One of the most famous examples is the Cantino Planisphere, a Portuguese world map secretly smuggled to Italy in 1502. It revealed astonishing geographic knowledge, coastlines far more detailed than expected. Some historians argue that Portugal may have known more about the Western Atlantic than official records admit. And if explorers reached parts of North America quietly, would they have told the world? Or would they have kept it hidden? Enter Miguel Corte-Real, a Portuguese explorer who vanished in 1502 while searching the North Atlantic for his missing brother. His disappearance became legend. Some believe he was lost at sea. Others believe he landed somewhere in North America and never returned. Certain researchers in the early 1900s claimed that Dighton Rock contains symbols representing the Corte-Real family crest. They even proposed that one carving reads as an abbreviated Latin inscription declaring land claimed for Portugal. But here's the problem. The letters are ambiguous, weathered, fragmented, overlapping. You can see what you want to see. And when national pride enters historical interpretation, objectivity becomes fragile. Still, the possibility lingers. Could Corte-Real have reached Massachusetts decades before permanent English settlements? When we talk about early transatlantic voyages, one name dominates: Christopher Columbus. But Columbus was not the first European to reach the Americas. We know Vikings reached Newfoundland around 1000 CE, so the Atlantic was not an impossible barrier. The real question becomes, how many voyages were lost to history? Ships sank. Records burned, kingdoms fell, medieval archives are incomplete. And powerful nations often rewrote narratives to legitimize claims. If Portugal or another maritime power reached North America secretly, would they have publicized it? Or would they have guarded the knowledge as a strategic advantage? Dighton Rock, in this theory, becomes not just a carving, but a geopolitical artifact. In 1513, a remarkable map was created by Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis. The Piri Reis map shows parts of the Americas with surprising accuracy for its time. Piri Reis himself wrote that he used multiple older maps as sources, some possibly from Columbus. But what were those earlier maps? How old were they? And who created them? Some alternative historians argue that fragments of lost voyages may survive only indirectly copied and recopied into later charts. Could Dighton Rock be connected to such forgotten expeditions? Mainstream historians remain cautious. But the existence of unexpectedly detailed early maps proves one thing. The age of discovery was more complex than the simplified version we learn in school. In the 5th, 10th, and 16th centuries, explorers marked land claims with crosses, inscriptions, or stone monuments. It was a way of saying, "This land now belongs to our crown." If Dighton Rock were altered or added to by European hands, it might have served that purpose. But here's a fascinating possibility. What if Europeans encountered an already carved Native American rock and misinterpreted it? What if they added their own marks to it, layer upon layer? Civilizations intersecting. Competing narratives etched into the same surface. In that case, Dighton Rock isn't proof of one secret voyage. It's evidence of cultural contact and cultural confusion. There's something deeply compelling about rewriting history. We love the idea that the official story is incomplete, that there was a hidden chapter, a suppressed truth. But historians must balance curiosity with evidence. Right now, there is no definitive proof that Dighton Rock records a secret European discovery of America. And yet, the mystery persists because the Atlantic world of the 1400s and 1500s was chaotic, competitive, and partially undocumented. And in those gaps, imagination thrives. Dighton Rock forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. History is not always a clean narrative. It's fragmented, partial, sometimes political, sometimes accidental, and sometimes carved into stone only to be misunderstood centuries later. In our next episode, we ask a different question. What if the mystery of Dighton Rock isn't about Europe at all, but about something far older, something indigenous, something spiritual, something we've overlooked entirely? For centuries, people have stared at the carvings on Dighton Rock and asked, who crossed the ocean to carve this? What secret voyage does it prove? What lost civilization does it reveal? Vikings, Portuguese explorers, Templars. But what if the greatest mystery of Dighton Rock isn't about Europe at all? What if the real story has been in front of us the entire time, and we just weren't looking in the right direction? Tonight, in our final episode, we strip away the speculation and search for something deeper, not just who carved the rock, but what it truly represents. For much of its recorded history, Dighton Rock was interpreted through a European lens. Early colonial scholars assumed that anything mysterious must be foreign, exotic, imported. But modern archaeology urges a different approach. Start with the people who lived there. Long before European ships appeared on the Atlantic horizon, the region around the Taunton River was home to native communities, particularly the ancestors of the Wampanoag. Petroglyph traditions existed across North America. Carved rocks were not unusual. What was unusual was European misunderstanding. Many 17th and 18th century colonists did not fully understand indigenous symbolic systems. When they saw the carvings, they searched for alphabets. They searched for Latin. They searched for Norse runes. They searched for something familiar. But indigenous carvings often functioned differently. They were not text in the European sense. They were symbolic, ceremonial, territorial, spiritual. Unlike alphabetic writing systems, many indigenous carvings communicate through imagery rather than phonetic letters. Human-like figures may represent ancestors. Geometric shapes may mark clan symbols. Lines and grids may represent journeys, water, or cosmology. When modern researchers re-examined Dighton Rock without forcing it into European frameworks, the carvings began to make more sense, not as a Norse inscription, not as a Portuguese claim, but as layered indigenous symbolism. And here's something fascinating. The carvings overlap. Some are deeper than others. This suggests that the rock may have been revisited repeatedly over generations. It may not represent a single moment, but a living site, a place returned to, added to, honored. Dighton Rock may not be a message from one event. It may be a conversation across centuries. Humans have a powerful tendency called pareidolia, the urge to see patterns where none exist. Faces in clouds, animals in constellations, letters in random lines. For centuries, scholars traced the rock's carvings by hand. But hand drawing is introduced bias. If someone believes they see a rune, they may unconsciously emphasize lines that support that belief. When modern 3D scanning techniques were applied, many of the supposed letters became far less convincing. Lines once interpreted as alphabets turned out to be cracks, or natural erosion, or overlapping carvings from different eras. This doesn't mean the rock is meaningless. It means meaning is fragile when filtered through expectation. There's another layer to this mystery, one that has little to do with the stone itself. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Americans were eager to connect their land to grand old world histories. A Viking carving in Massachusetts? That would link New England to epic sagas. A Templar inscription? That would tie America to medieval legend. A lost Portuguese explorer? That would rewrite colonial hierarchy. Dighton Rock became a canvas not just for ancient carvings, but for modern imagination. Each generation projected its own identity anxieties onto the stone, and in doing so, sometimes overshadowed indigenous history. So what does Dighton Rock truly represent? It represents continuity. It represents indigenous presence long before colonization. It represents the human instinct to leave marks, to say, "We are here." It represents how history can be misinterpreted when viewed through only one cultural lens. And it represents humility, because despite centuries of study, we still cannot fully decode it, and maybe we're not supposed to. Some knowledge is contextual. Some symbols belong to traditions that cannot be translated cleanly into modern categories. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Dighton Rock is this: not every mystery needs to be solved to be meaningful. It's tempting to chase dramatic theories, secret voyages, hidden nights, forgotten empires. But sometimes the truth is quieter and more powerful. A community by a river, generations carving symbols, a sacred place overlooking water, a story told not in letters, but in lines and figures. And centuries later, we stand before it, still trying to understand. Dighton Rock doesn't prove Vikings conquered New England. It doesn't confirm secret European expeditions. It doesn't reveal hidden treasure. What it reveals is something more human, our desire to connect to the past, our tendency to project our stories onto ancient surfaces, and our struggle to accept that some histories are not ours to rewrite. The mystery of Dighton Rock isn't just about who carved it, it's about how we interpret the past, and what that interpretation says about us. Si hoc aetner in praeteridum gabisi estis, canalem nostrum sustenit. Subscribit, probate, et miraculum communicate. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please support our channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the wonder.